But then those little victories of I got a B on that assignment, or I got my first test back and I did pretty well. And then the beauty of it is they don't just hold that information to themselves. They're calling their family members. They're calling their children. They're shouting it from the rooftops that, I mean, when we first give that fall semester grade report after their first semester in the program, they hang that up on their wall. They're sending it home to their families because they're incredibly proud of their achievement.
Welcome back to Prosper, everyone. I'm your host, Andreas Widmer, joined as always by my colleague, Rebecca Teddy. We're coming to you from the Sioka Center, the Entrepreneurship Center of the Catholic University of America. Today, we welcome to the show three people involved in a very special project, the Hope Western Prison Education Program.
Yes, this is a really innovative program to offer classical education to incarcerated gentlemen, to the incarcerated community, and with really astonishing results that we know you're going to want to hear about. That and the entrepreneurial approach that it took to find this solution to a particular problem. So let's start. This is our first time ever hosting three people simultaneously. So we're going to pray to the tech gods to keep us going. But let's introduce you one by one. Just briefly introduce yourselves to our listeners. And we'll start with Richard Ray. I believe that you founded this ministry. Is that right?
Oh, I would say that I was one of many people who put their shoulders to the wheel to get things started. That was back in, I think, 2018 or so. And I credit my colleague on this show today, David Stubbs, for really having the idea before pretty much anybody else did. I was actually a little late to the game.
Well, in that case, David, how about you? Go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Well, hi, Rebecca and Andres. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm David Stubbs. I'm professor of ethics and theology at Western Theological Seminary, and now I'm also the co-director of this prison education program. And with Rich, I was part of the team that really started it. I think conversations about it really started in 2017, and we developed a pilot program in 2019, and I guess you could say the full-scale program really started in 2021. So it's wonderful to have a chance to talk about it. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. And so then, Richard, we kind of cut you off to tell us about your actual title. You're the co-director of the program now. Is that correct?
I used to be. I retired from the college in last July, and so the last 7 or 8 years of my working professional life were I was in the traces with David as a partner running the program, and when I retired, the program, in its great wisdom, hired Carrie Bosma to be my successor, and I'm very pleased to be on this podcast with her today.
That's wonderful. And Carrie, not least, but last, to introduce yourself, you definitely are co-director of the program now with David, I believe, or at least that's what the website says. How did you come to the program?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to talk about the Hope Western Prison Education Program. I've actually been working in the field of higher education in prison since 2016 and was with another program from 2016 until last summer when I joined the Hope College staff to become co-director of this program. I started kind of through the back door. I was connected to a few professors at another university who began a prison education program and had the right interests and skill sets to support the success of that program, and was happy to do so. I came into it as a calling and realized as I was doing that this was really where I wanted to spend my time and my professional energy. And so I'm really grateful to follow Rich Ray, and there's no one that I would have followed other than him into a role like this, because he had established a really strong foundation alongside David. And it's been a joy to work side by side with David in the last year and a bit to continue the success of this program.
So Richard, but the one thing that the listeners don't know yet is what does this program do, and how did you ever come up with that idea?
Okay. Well, um, this program simply extends the Hope College mission to a new campus, which happens to be in a prison, to a new um, category of student who happens to be incarcerated men serving long, indeterminate, or even life sentences in prison. And we're very quick to point out to interested people that there's actually not that much that's new here. Hope College has been providing a liberal arts education in the Christian tradition since 1866 to great effect to students who, are sort of in the 18 to 22-year-old kind of traditional college age. And, there was a great desert of intellectual formation opportunity in the prisons. And we had good examples to follow. We didn't have to make this up ourselves. There's a kind of growing ecosystem for college and prison around the country. We were very careful to make sure that we looked around and learned some lessons. And we went slow. We piloted things and um, made some mistakes without sort of lasting or catastrophic consequences before we actually launched the degree granting phase of the program. Um, that's in broad strokes kind of what it is and what it does and what it hopes to do.
Very cool. David, how did you said it got started maybe 2016, 2017, and sounds like maybe a couple of you were brainstorming. Where did the idea come from?
Well, there is a conference that was hosted on Hope College's campus, and it was actually the idea for that conference was an incarcerated student in the Calvin Prison Initiative, and he was a pen pal with Jared Ortiz, one of the professors here at Hope College, and through their interactions, they hosted this conference. After that, the conference was a wild success. I don't think anyone quite expected it to be quite the success that it was. In the aftermath of that conference, there was a group of professors from both Western Theological Seminary and Hope College who got together and said, hey, maybe we should do a prison education program. And I came back from sabbatical the next fall, and that conversation was still going on. And I sort of sheepishly raised my hand and said, well, maybe I'll try and take this on. And we need somebody from Hope College. And I know Jared was trying to twist Rich's arm at the same time to take this on. Rich and I met in a coffee shop at one point and sort of looked each other in the eye, said, are we going to do this thing? And so we started brainstorming and then talking to people. And some of the people that we talked to, one of them is here on this call, Carrie Bosma. I jokingly say that I really met Carrie in prison in Louisiana because it was through the influence of the Calvin Prison Initiative and others. We ended up flying down to see some of the prison education that was going on in Angola prison down in Louisiana. And so we were talking to a lot of prison education program people, visiting prisons, trying to get some idea about what this might look like. And that those conversations took a while. And then we had to convince everybody at Hope and Western that this was actually a good thing.
But Carrie, so you know a lot of these programs, right? But you have to say that this one is different. And how is it different? Because we're impressed. And when we first saw this, these people have to come on our podcast. We focus on entrepreneurship and faith, and think here you have a perfect example of these two things coming together. How is this different from what you've seen of other programs?
That's a great question. Nationwide, as Rich mentioned, there is kind of a emerging ecosystem of prison education programs, but almost the entire conversation around prison education programs stems from preparation for a job for when an incarcerated person, yeah, gets out of prison. And that is an intent and a goal for the students going through our program who do end up being released. But as Rich also mentioned, we invite to apply students or incarcerated people who are serving longer sentences. And the reason for that stems from the model that we saw in Louisiana at Angola Prison, where they equipped and entrusted incarcerated people to be stewards of their community and to have a positive impact on their community, regardless of whether they're outside in a community eventually or within a prison context. And so the way that the program is designed, and I invite David or Rich to talk a little bit more about a liberal arts-based education, but the program is really designed to transform individuals through their Christian education in the liberal arts, and that naturally makes them better citizens, not only outside if they are released, but while they are incarcerated. And so the model and the way that we're approaching the education is not just career readiness or job readiness upon release, but is really seeing these individuals as human beings who are worthy of this opportunity to grow and to learn and to discover that they have something to offer. Even those that are serving a long sentence, they have something to give. If we equip and empower them with skills for having a positive impact on their community, they're the ones that are transforming or have the ability to transform the prison system from the inside out.
Now, guys, double click on that a little bit, because exactly as Carrie said, this is exactly the thing that fascinates me is so much, I would say, even of our conventional education system. Like we all of us work on a university campus, and so much of the discussion there, even, for conventional students, is jobs oriented, skills oriented. And so say a little bit more about the liberal arts approach for people who are incarcerated, and what's liberating about that.
Well, if I could just,
go ahead, Rich. Yes.
Sorry, let me just say one quick word about that, and then pitch over to you, David. The first, one of the very first things that incarcerated students in our program hear from us, literally on their very first day of orientation, is this: your college education is not merely for your own enjoyment. And that is a kind of headline, mantra, meme, I don't know, just call it whatever you want, that we have found is very sticky in the minds of our students. And they, for reasons I don't completely understand, seem to remember it and seem to, with some exceptions, seem to really live into it with great effect. And it's important to understand that prison is a terribly dehumanizing place that teaches people through all of its systems and all of its environment not to trust anybody. And the college education that David and Carrie are providing, and the professors that are providing, is rehumanizing these students and getting them to trust other humans, sometimes for the very first time in their life. And it's unbelievably powerful when you see this happening right in front of you. I mean, it's very difficult to put into words, but you know it when you see it. David?
Oh, yeah. No, I love talking about this aspect of the program quite a bit. I remember last summer, our leadership team went on retreat, and we sort of are taking stock of what's happening, because we're seeing our students changing really dramatically. Sometimes it feels like a greenhouse. I mean, any educational experience, you see students change, and that's some of the delight of it. But it feels like that ours are transforming so quickly before our eyes, and it's really quite remarkable. So we thought, well, what really are we offering them? And we came up with, we're offering them a Christian liberal arts education, and we're offering them a meaningful learning community. So we have, students who are in 4 cohorts. We're offering about 40 classes this year inside the prison, and our students get to know one another. They get to know the professors, and they wrestle with the material, the liberal arts curriculum, and all that together is very transformative. And when we talk about liberal arts, there's a lot of people look at liberal arts education for the transformation that happens with people's thinking and their skills. We also talk a lot about truth, beauty, and goodness in our program, and see that as in some ways at the heart of our education. And so our students are hungry for meaning. They're hungry for purpose in their lives, and they really want their lives to be significant. And so we're wrestling with the great literature and all the subject matters of a liberal arts education, and they are finding food for their soul, you could say. And then they're putting it into practice with each other. And that's also a crucial aspect of the program, is that this community that we have, they're learning how to interact with each other in really deep ways, and they feel cared for. And they feel kind of love and community and brotherhood and sisterhood in ways that they've really, most of them have really never experienced in their lives
It,
before.
of course, a liberal arts education and reading all the way back to the Greeks or back into the beginnings of the Bible and so on also makes you feel a part of history, and you can look at life in a bigger scheme than just what you experienced yourself. But Richard, I can't help when you just said the words about uh, prison is an unbelievably inhumane place, uh, and then refer to the fact that there are Christian sentiments there, and there's Christians in prison, right? And that makes a difference. What comes to my mind right away is Dostoevsky, who wrote about who of course knows what he's talking about when he writes that he was in Siberia and he was incarcerated, and it was one of the things that made him uh, afterwards. He went in as a socialist and a kind of an agnostic, and he came out a Christian, a deeply convinced Christian, because he felt that he met Jesus's presence in. He said, in the most inhumane place, when you see what, and it impresses you, Richard. I can see, because you're saying it's hard to describe. Dostoevsky writes about acts of love, where somebody, and the love in wanting the good for the other and putting yourself back, that surprised him, or in a positive way, surprised him so deeply that it changed his life forever. And uh, any chance that the students ever read Dostoevsky, and do you know of these stories?
I don't know if Dostoevsky's on the curriculum in any of our professors' classes right now, but I can tell you a very formative story from the very first class period of this program. David Stubbs was the professor, and I think the class was titled something like "What is living for?" or "What are people for?" What are people for? Just a terrific question as a title for a class. And I was just his like sidecar rider coming in to sort of see how this would go, and he was the professor, and he assigns on the very first night uh, Aristotle's Ethics, you know, and says, "I'd like you to read this book, and we'll be back next week to talk about it." And as we're walking out of the prison that night, I said to him, "Man, I don't think that was a good idea. Um, that's I don't think I could read that book in a week, much less say anything of substance about it." And we don't know these guys. They haven't been in school since junior high. Some of them, you know. He said, "Yeah, I know, but I think figured let's experiment. Let's give them something tough and let's see what happens." Well, we came back the next week, and David says, "Okay, I'm going to put you into groups, and I've got some questions for you to talk about. But before I do, does anybody have any just general comments about what you read? What do you think about Aristotle?" And a guy named Sean raises his hand, and he stands up to ask his question or to make his statement, which is, again, a very undergraduate thing to do. And he says, "The first time I read this book, I didn't understand a single word of it. It was just too hard. So I read it again, and it was still very, very challenging. He said the third time I read it, I started to see little bits popping here and there. And now that I've read it a fourth time, I can see how Aristotle is really describing my life in all the things that he's saying here. And I'm telling you that I haven't been inside the prison once in 8 years where something like that hasn't happened. Uh, it was an unbelievable experience that made me say, where am I and who am I with and what's happening?
Yeah, we when we tell our professors, we sometimes people, well, a lot of our professors just have no idea what it'll be like to teach people in prison, right? And and it's quite a remarkable place because you bring any book inside that context, and it is going to ring differently. If you bring the Bible in, if you bring in Kant's "What is Enlightenment," that was another, an essay that we assigned in that course, and it was really remarkable to see our guys' responses to it. But the guys are so hungry to even prove to themselves. They want to learn. It's like most of our professors see that these are the best students we've ever had, and it's really remarkable to see the time, effort, and seriousness by which our students take their education.
It's like a lot of these young men and women, they suffer from the curse of low expectations. That we question their dignity. That they like have a flaw. From the outside, they have a flawed dignity, so nobody has any expectations of them. And then you live up to the expectations. I mean, I don't know, Carrie, you've worked with this much longer than I. I have. I have to say, I've never set foot in a prison, but is there some truth to what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I was just inside the prison last night and talked to a student who said, I had no idea I was capable of succeeding as a college student because nobody in my family has ever gone to college. So that is definitely a narrative that many of them have deeply held understanding of their capability. And it takes a while for them to gain that confidence, which is why the community part of our program is so important because within those first couple of weeks, there are students who think I must have misjudged what my expectations were here. I thought I was just going to come and sit in class and, read some books and get some information. And then they realized that this college experience is a robust, really high caliber education and that they're going to have to work hard, but then those little victories of I got a B on that assignment, or I got my first test back and I did pretty well. And then the beauty of it is they don't just hold that information to themselves, they're calling their family members, they're calling their children, they're shouting it from the rooftops that, when we first give that fall semester grade report after their first semester in the program, they hang that up on their wall. They're sending it home to their families because they're incredibly proud of their achievement. And we had our program's very first graduation this past summer. So June 25th, we graduated our first cohort. And they had family members who were able to come into the facility with the permission of the Department of Corrections and experience that graduation day with them. And there is absolutely nothing like watching a mother, a daughter, a brother, a cousin watch their loved one walk across that stage. The sense of pride and the sense of accomplishment from the students was just a beautiful thing to watch. It was really wonderful. And
This is
and
amazing.
yeah,
It's I would call that a resurrection story, and it's just the way you restore and allow dignity to flourish again. We're going to finish in a minute, but first we need to take a break because we want to invite people to our fall family business consortium meeting. But we'll be right back with more from the team from Hope Western Prison Ministry. But first, friends, we thank you so much for bringing us to season 4 of Prosper. Can you believe it? If you're enjoying it, please leave us a good review, subscribe, or leave an interesting comment. All those things tell the algorithm that to put Prosper in front of more people who would benefit from it. So please help us. Prosper is entirely funded through donations, so we thank you for your support.
Did you know that family businesses account for 2/3 of America's GDP and are responsible for creating 6 in 10 jobs in the United States? That's right, family enterprises like yours are the backbone of our economy, the heart of our communities, and the keepers of legacies that span generations. At the Family Business Consortium, we've created a community of peers who truly get it. They've sat in your chair, faced similar decisions, and found ways to thrive while keeping family at the core of their success. We host 2 free full-day seminars annually, available both in person on our gorgeous campus in Washington, D.C., and online. Our next gathering is Friday, October 17th. Find out more in the show notes to the podcast or at familybusinessconsortium.org. Our mission is simple: to help generations of family businesses like yours grow in every sense of the word, professionally, personally, and purposefully. Because when family businesses thrive, communities prosper.
Welcome back to Prosper. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Richard Ray, Carrie Bosma, and David Stubbs with Hope Western Prison Ministry. And before the break, we were just hearing some beautiful stories about, Andreas appropriately said, redemption stories or resurrection stories about incarcerated people in the incarcerated community who are just brought to life and discover their own dignity through the power of a Christian liberal arts education. I wonder if you might share some success stories if they come to you. And while you're thinking of that, I'll ask a slightly different question, which is, so first of all, in the first episode or first segment, David, you mentioned my personal friend, Jared Ortiz, who has been very, I would say, typically low key about his own role in getting this going. Because on Facebook, I've watched him promote this, and he's never mentioned a word about his own role in getting it going. So that's very Jared. And then our colleague, Luke Burgess, the author of Wanting, recently had a really profound experience going to visit the prison because some of the people in your program had read Wanting, and he got to meet some. I don't know if you have something to say about that, because we've read Luke's perspective, but I wonder what that perspective was like for you.
Well, I assigned excerpts from Luke's book in the first year seminar that I taught a few years ago. And that combined with another class that a couple of our professors taught that exposed students to Rene Girard's thinking really lit a fire under one of our students by the name of Carlos. And Carlos just got, this was like a bone in his teeth, and he wrote papers about this. He's published a paper on Girard's theories as they apply to the sort of prison context. And as a result of his scholarship, he was recently inducted as only the second ever incarcerated student into Phi Beta Kappa since its founding in 1776. That was very cool. But I have to tell you, what was even cooler was when Luke showed up for the convocation a few weeks ago. Carlos didn't know he was coming, and I introduced the two of them. Carlos, you would have thought Carlos was at the airport in New York when the Beatles landed. It was so cool, so great. Yeah,
There's a lot of this. It makes me all excited to even think of the prospect of doing something like that. I usually, if your experience is anything like mine or Rebecca's, I think we learn a lot from our students as well. I think it's almost like we learn more than we teach them. Tell me a little bit about what surprised you that you learned, David, when you started to. I mean, I presume you weren't like an expert in prison life at all, but so what surprised you when you started to get immersed in that environment?
Well, so much. I want to go in about four different directions at once, but um, let me say this in terms of my own learning. I know both of you have referred to this as a prison education ministry, and it certainly is that. We prefer to call it a prison education program because we're simply extending the missions of Hope and Western to incarcerated men. And the way I usually talk about it is it's more like a gift exchange because everybody who comes in is really transformed. And so myself, as well as our professors, one of the things we tell people is it's sort of like an intercultural immersion experience because a lot of the guys in prison come from cultures that are very different, situations that are very different than a lot of our professors or other students on the main campus. And so, in some ways, it's just learning to get to know people with very different life stories and who often have very tragic and very difficult life stories. And so, I guess how would you say it's just this transformative dialogue across difference, and no matter what, that's always such a great learning experience. And we often talk about the humanization in this program, and just seeing that a lot of these guys they've really want to change. They have already, a lot of them turn their lives around and really want to be productive citizens, loving neighbors, and it's just really wonderful to see that people can actually really change, and that kind of change is possible. But change is also possible among the prison staff as well as our faculty. And I'm really excited. We have something called an Inside Out program, which has just started this year, and so we're able to take seminary students from Western Theological Seminary, and they're now taking classes inside the prison alongside our students. And that's just a wonderful kind of transformative experience for our students on the inside and the outside to be able to see the material through each other's eyes. So that kind of cross-cultural, cross so many boundaries experience, I think, is just really wonderful.
I would love to chime in with just another short story, but something that demonstrates the kind of success story of how those who are incarcerated, if you give them the right skills, they can have a positive impact on the people that are around them. In our freshman class, we have students take a class called Leading with Courage and Compassion. And in that class, they read and learn about nonviolent communication. And in the context of the classroom, they begin to practice listening and communicating in a way that is productive, is empathetic, is understanding the needs of the person who you're communicating with. And they do this in small groups. They do it with their fellow peers. But we had one of the students who took the class this last spring, and he learned these skills of nonviolent communication, and he was so enthralled with the concept that he started to see ways that the people around him in the housing unit and on the prison yard who were not part of our program could benefit from learning nonviolent communication. And he decided that he was going to start employing this practice in circumstances where it would be beneficial. So there was a fight between two individuals, not students in our program, but just general population prisoners. Our student took some of his fellow classmates and inserted themselves into this scenario where there were people who were in conflict, and they gathered chairs in a circle and they sat them down and they said, we're going to talk about what's happening here. And they started to unpack, why did you say this to this person? Why did you respond by hitting him? And they started to unpack the source of the conflict. And through their communication, the two gentlemen were able to communicate why they were angry and what was the source of that. And by the end of it, the two gentlemen who had been fighting were hugging. The students of ours who were around them were encouraging them and saying, this is a good thing. And the rest of the population in the housing unit came to our students and said, first of all, why did you do that? Second of all, how did you know how to do that? And the why did you do that was rooted in the fact that that's not what you do in prison. You don't get involved in other people's conflict because it could bring conflict upon yourself. But they also recognized that you were using a set of skills that I don't have. And how did you learn that? And so that student developed a proposal over the last few months for teaching a workshop on nonviolent communication for general population prisoners. And he just told me last night that proposal got approved. And so he's going to be teaching nonviolent communication to general population peers. And he's a very influential person in the prison context. And so that's going to change how those individuals live and move within the prison context. So that's a success story. And he's only a sophomore. So I'm really excited about what he's going to be doing over the next couple of years. But that's an example of the way that equipping incarcerated people impacts how they are in the prison for the benefit not only of themselves, but for the prison context.
Yeah, that's absolutely outstanding. Tell me a little bit. So, the aforementioned Jared Ortiz, and then also, I think another colleague, or at least former colleague of yours at Hope, Kevin Sambo, who is also a fellow of our Institute for Human Ecology. Both of them have written about how the incarcerated students are actually their favorite students. So, the ones who are most hungry to learn and the most impressive. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about why that might be, and tell us too how people get selected for this program. How do they apply? And what makes them say, "Yeah, I want to come and do a liberal arts education."
Sure, I'll address maybe the second half of your question, and then if Rich or David want to address the first part. The way that students come to our program, they have to meet certain eligibility criteria that we've agreed upon with the Michigan Department of Corrections. That usually means they have to be ticket free, so they have to have demonstrated positive behavior. They have to be eligible to be at a level 2 security level prison, because we allow folks from across different facilities to apply for the program. And if they are accepted, they're transferred to Muskegon Correctional Facility in Muskegon, Michigan. And then they just need to make sure that they're eligible to be transferred to that facility. We have an application process, much like the main campus, where prospective students complete an application. They complete 3 essay questions that are proctored by a Department of Corrections staff member. We receive those applications. Last year, we received 75 applications for the 20 positions that we had open, or the 20 slots that we had for students. And so we have a team, an admissions team, who reviews the applications for the program, and we select those 20 students that we believe are a good fit for the program, who have the potential to benefit from the opportunity. And then they get transferred to Muskegon, and we do a pretty robust 10-week orientation with those new students to get them acclimated to the prison facility and to our program. And we do that before they begin their classes in the fall.
I've forgotten the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
Just what makes this population such good students, such that Jared Ortiz and Kevin Sambo, who are not slouches, and you gentlemen are no slouches, why is it so enjoyable to teach them?
Well, I'll just tell you a story from a class that Jared taught at another college in prison program that I had the pleasure to go observe, because I thought this was a crazy, stupid idea. But he said, "Oh, it's really great. You'd really love it." And I said, "Well, let me observe your class." And he said, "Okay." So I went to this other prison and I watched, and the subject was the Christological controversies, about which I know the title. That's it. And 3 minutes into the class, one of the guys raises his hand, and Jared calls on him, and the man stands up to ask his question. I mean, my undergraduate students on the main campus don't do that, but this guy did. That made an impression on me. And he said, "I wonder, Professor, if you could help me understand what Irenaeus is trying to say on page 78 of our text, because it seems to stand in stark contrast to what Origen is saying in the footnote on page 152. And that question has obviously left a deep impression upon me. And before Jared could answer the question, four hands went up. Not just one hand, four hands went up. But Jared called on one of them, and this guy stands up and turns. And now remember, this is in a prison. These guys are doing hard time for hard crimes. And he turns and faces the guy and says, this. If my colleague would read with greater care and attention, he would see that Irenaeus, a few pages later, goes on to explain himself such that his thesis comports perfectly with what Origen says in the footnote on page 152. Now, if you multiply that times, however many classes there are in a semester, and however many, professors you've got teaching those classes, what you have is about the richest learning experience that you can imagine. It's the richest learning experience I've ever seen.
This is amazing. Absolutely. Um, One last question, quickly. We have to start landing the plane here, but how is all this? Who makes this possible? I presume these classes are not free. There must be. Is this a program? Do they get a Pell Grant, or how does this work?
I would be happy to talk about that. Our program is funded, the first 5 years of the program were actually funded entirely through private donations. We do rely on those who believe in the mission of the program to support it. In the last 2 years, we have received the eligibility to receive Pell Grant funding for our students who qualify. The cost per student for a year of education far exceeds what a Pell Grant provides. And so we do still require donations in order to fill that gap. And this year, we also have received some state funding made as grants through the Michigan Department of Corrections to programs that are providing a bachelor's degree level program. So we do have several streams of revenue, but private funding is an important and necessary part in a way that those who believe in our mission can partner with us to provide this education to our students.
That philanthropic opportunity provides an incredible amount of joy to donors. I mean, it's not just writing a check. We bring them into the prison and let them meet the students and, have them attend important functions in the prison. And the donors come away changed.
I was going to ask you before we go, this must not have been easy to get going. So there's just that, like the initial, you talked about your own misgivings and how much research you had to do, and you had to go seek out Carrie for her expertise and all of the research. But I imagine that even bureaucratically, there was a lot. And so we're entrepreneurs. We're always interested in how do you solve those problems. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as I look back on it, I think that the Holy Spirit slowed us down in ways that were really helpful. COVID slowed us down in ways that were really frustrating, but really helpful. The fact that we had leadership transitions at both the college and the seminary slowed us down in ways that were helpful. It gave us more time to do the thing on a more limited basis, to learn what we didn't know, to not bite off more than we could chew. And then, because we did it in this sort of pilot minimalist way, we had a proof of concept. We could go back to the leadership, and we could go to the donors, and we could go to the state, and we can say, this is what we know is true based on the work we've done so far. And then it just got easier after that.
Yeah, it's an amazing. I mean, in some ways, we're running a branch campus in a very difficult environment, and so everything that goes into college education, plus working between three major institutions: the Michigan Department of Corrections, Hope College, and Western Theological Seminary, and trying to provide an education in a place where you're constantly having to make arguments for why this is a good idea. it can be challenging. Yeah.
This is such, we could go on for a long time here, guys. This is such a joyful experience talk with you, and I think one of the things that God is doing through you is to bring joy to an often helpless or hopeless place. And I think that itself is a gift. But you're bringing, as you said, truth, goodness, and beauty into the prison system and into the lives of these people, and that alone is just an amazing achievement. And I'm just in awe at what you're all doing. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and for all the work that you're doing.
Before we go, where can listeners find you to connect and to maybe write out a little check if they're moved by these stories? And we'll be sure to put those links in our show notes.
Wonderful. Our website is hope.edu/HWPEP. We have a Facebook page, Hope Western Prison Education Program, where folks can follow stories and updates of our students and the things happening in our program. And we would love to have more folks sign up for our newsletter, which you can also do on the website.
I think the first thing, though, is to Google Hope Western Prison Education Program commencement highlights. And there's just a really wonderful video to see what it looks like.
We can put this into the show notes, and I wonder if you also do you in your work, do you also publish some of the syllabi and so, because Carrie, I think I want to take the nonviolent communication. Like, can people who listen learn with you all? How do we go about that?
Yeah, that's probably an innovation we haven't quite crossed the threshold on yet. But I will say, Andreas, that I talked earlier about the growing ecosystem for college and prison. We have established in the last few years the Michigan Consortium for Higher Education in Prison, which is a membership organization of now 13 Michigan colleges and universities that offer degree programs in Michigan prisons. And we are creating really robust affinity groups from people that work at those institutions so they can learn from each other about how to better support their incarcerated college students so their programs can be all that they ought to be. And we're really trying to sort of help provide a platform for everybody to share what they've learned by doing this work together.
It's beautiful. It's nice to see that good programs are growing. Rebecca, did you want to say anything, or
just thank you all so much? And as promised, we'll put all of these links in our show notes. And listeners, we hope that you are blessed by what you heard today and encouraged by it. And, as always, leave us a great review and leave us your feedback in social media, because it really does help. We love to hear from you. And we hope to hear again from Richard Ray, Carrie Bosma, and David Stubbs with Hope Western Prison Ministry, because you'll have more to tell us in future years.
Yeah, I look forward to that. And unfortunately, that's it for all the time we have today, friends. Take care. And as always, till next time, we hope you prosper.